Welcome to the Tennessee Performing Arts Center's InsideOut podcast. Today, we discuss the Broadway touring production of Mrs. Doubtfire with composer Wayne Kirkpatrick and cast members Aaron Kaburick, David Hibbard, and Rob McClure. Mrs. Doubtfire is part of the 23-24 HCA Healthcare TriStar Health Broadway at TPAC season, presented in partnership with Nissan. And we want to thank our InsideOut sponsor, Vanderbilt University. I'm Kristen Horsley with TPAC Education and Community Engagement. This discussion includes the tumultuous journey of the musical Mrs. Doubtfire, from opening on Broadway, closing due to COVID, reopening, and now touring with fantastic audience response. Let's hear from the panel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron Kaburick. I play Frank Hibbard in the show, the brother of Daniel / Mrs. Doubtfire, and I'm originally from Southern Illinois, kind of by St. Louis.
Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm David Hibbard. My dad was in the Air Force, so originally from everywhere, but we ended up in Canton, Ohio, where my mother lived. So that's where we are. And tonight I'm going to start out playing the judge. Then I'm going to turn into Maggie Thatcher. Thank you. Then I'm going to be Mr. Jolly. And then I'm going to be the doctor. Good luck. Good luck finding me.
It's like, where's Waldo?
Hi, I'm Rob McClure. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I played Daniel Hibbard and Mrs. Doubtfire.
Just you wait.
I'm Wayne Kirkpatrick, and I am one of the composers. You didn't say where you're from.
New Jersey.
Okay. I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but I've been in Nashville since 1982, so I am from Nashville.
Yeah. And in some of the Hall of Fames around us right now.
Yes, and so, I'm excited that you are all on the panel together because I understand that you were all in the original Broadway production of Mrs. Doubtfire, and all kinds of drama happened with that show. So tell us a little bit about the journey, Wayne, about, it being on Broadway and then everything that happened.
Okay, well, we did an out of town in Seattle in 2019. And we ran, it opened a little bit before Thanksgiving or during Thanksgiving and ran all the way through to New Year's, right? And so then we took the show. That was our preview. That was our out of town. We took the show into New York.
We should say we broke all the box office records at the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle.
It did very well in Seattle.
It was like hugely celebrated coming to New York with this great buzz and word of mouth and a great advance off of this successful run.
So we went into rehearsals in February of 2020. And
It's really
the audience is ahead of me. Yeah.
It's like seeing the Titanic.
Yes. And so then we moved into the theater. We did tech rehearsal. We opened the show in previews. We did 3 previews, and then COVID hit, and we were actually as for me, I don't know what you guys were doing on that day. On that particular day, me and my brother were reconceiving one of the musical numbers in the show. So we were in our apartment, and we were kind of staging. We were using salt and pepper shakers and say, okay, here's this person there, And we got an email from our agent that said, as of 5 o'clock today, all of Broadway is shutting down. So. And then, I don't know what you guys were doing.
We were in rehearsal.
I was in rehearsal. I was on stage on a couch with Jen Gambatese rehearsing a beautiful song in Act 2 called Let Go. Jerry Zaks legendary director Jerry Zaks was standing 8 feet in front of me. I remember the beat we were working. It was about Miranda grabbing my hand, a beat you'll see tonight. We were working that moment, and our producer, Kevin McCullum, came walking down the aisle and said, we're shutting down for COVID. And we started to hear a little bit about COVID because an usher at Six the Musical had tested positive for COVID. And I think everyone was like, it's reached Broadway. Like, it was the first time we heard of anyone in New York City having it. And an usher at 6 had tested positive, and with it, not 12 hours later, Broadway shut down. But we were told, leave everything in your dressing room. The show's not closed. We'll come back. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And 18 months later. But what was crazy is our dressing room stations remained as they were when Mrs. Doubtfire's face was sitting on a bust at my dressing room station next to a picture of my daughter for 18 months. And I come back and it's sitting right where I left it. In fact, we unfortunately had a cast member who passed away during the pandemic, and we would go back into the theater 18 months later, and her dressing room station was as it was when we had left 18 months earlier. It was like a time capsule. Mm-hmm. Pretty astonishing. Where were you? You were in rehearsal too?
Yeah,
you were all
we
there?
were in the
called
dressing
us.
room,
Yep.
listening to that beat happen above us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we walked in, so me and Carrie, we were like, well, we should probably go to the theater. When we heard that, we should probably go to the theater and figure out what's going to happen. And we walked in as you and Jen were rehearsing that thing that you were talking about. And then the news started trickling in around the theater, and yeah.
But they
guess
didn't keep
what?
us... Oh, go ahead.
We came back.
Yeah.
And here we are. It has a happy ending.
Well, we actually came back 3 times.
We
in
stopped and
Broadway.
started
I left
3
out the,
times.
He left
bumpy
that
parts.
part out.
Yes.
But we're here.
We're here.
Yeah.
And so what happened was when the show shut down for the 3rd time, well, we shut down the first time with COVID, and then we came back 18 months later. We opened, we went through all of rehearsals. We went through a very long preview period. And then we opened the show. So we did officially open in New York, and then Omicron came through. And I think at one point, maybe 22 cast and crew members.
Maybe 45.
Okay. And
By the end of the run, we were expecting locusts to show up. It was like we could not catch a break.
yeah. So after the 3rd time, it closed down. So then we took the show over to England, and we did the same process over again. We did an out of town in Manchester, and kind of a repeat, kind of like it was in Seattle. It went really well, and then we moved it into London on the West End, where it is playing. There's a completely different cast over there, and it was playing. And in fact, tonight was the 200th performance of that show over there. So that's running like gangbusters. And then we came back, and then we opened this tour, and just so you know, these guys that were everyone that was involved with the original cast, we went to them and said, if you want to do the tour, it's yours to do, So, and these 4 responded, and a lot of people were in other shows, and so. But I personally am just thrilled to have these guys still with us. And I will also say, we did another show called Something Rotten, and all of these guys were in Something Rotten too.
That's true.
So original cast members for both Something Rotten and
We've been family since was that 2015?
2015, yes, and rehearsals before that. So so they're old friends now.
I'm going to ask a question about that process. Did you first meet Wayne during Something Rotten? And is that, talk about that experience, and is that what kept you and made you decide to, hey, I want to do another show with him?
You were first.
I did so I did a 1-week reading of Something Rotten. I want to say that was January of 2014, maybe, which is just they bring in a bunch of actors into a room. You work on the script for a week, see what works, what doesn't work. And so that was the first time that I met Wayne and Wayne's brother, Kerry, who writes with him, and John O'Farrell, who's our 3rd writer, who lives in England. And that quickly went into a workshop maybe 7 months later or so. That's when David came on board. And we did a 4-week workshop where we, sort of worked on the script even more, staged everything to see what it looked like with just sort of mock props and set pieces. And that was maybe October of 2014. And we quickly got greenlit for Broadway. And we were in Broadway rehearsals like 3 months later or 2 months later. It was fast. Yeah, January. Yeah, and Wayne and Carrie are, very hands-on. You were in rehearsals pretty much every day, so we all got to know them very well. Once you get past their mean streak and how. So we got to know them quite well. So anytime they call, we'll say yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and the process, I think a lot of I know a lot of young students don't understand really the process, and it's one of the big lessons that whenever we do talkbacks, one of the most important things, everyone's like, do you have any advice? And our advice is you work hard and be nice and want to be invited to the party and invited back. And so that's sort of how it is. Our dear friend that we used to work with, I used to work with in shows, he was the director of Something Rotten, so they just get all their friends together to read and to sing, and then if you're lucky enough to be asked back, it sort of happens that way. So thank heavens we were asked to sing the first reading of Mrs. Doubtfire. They're like, let's just get a bunch of people together and our friends, and so that's how it happened. So we didn't audition, and these young kids are like, wait, what? You're like, yeah, but they just know that we're great musicians and we work hard and our hearts are always in it.
Yeah, but in a weird way, like our producer is a guy named Kevin McCullum, and I went to an open call for Kevin for a show called Avenue Q on Broadway in 2006. And I went to an open call. I didn't know Kevin. I didn't know anyone. Auditioned, had a callback. Auditioned, had a callback. Had to go through 3 days of puppet camp. Had to go through all these things. Then did Avenue Q on Broadway. Then they asked me to do the first national tour. I did 2 years on tour with Avenue Q. Then I get an audition to replace Brian Darcy James in Something Rotten for this team. I went in, I auditioned, I got it. I did the last 9 months on Broadway. Then I did the entire first national tour for 18 months on, and then when they were looking for someone to play Mrs. Doubtfire, I tell students I didn't have to audition, and you see them go like, I knew it. My uncle was right. It's who you know. It's not what you know. And you go, no, I actually was auditioning for Mrs. Doubtfire for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like that entire journey was my audition, because when they are looking around going, who can I trust with this thing? Having that decade of a relationship behind you, they know exactly what I'm good at. They know what I can do. They know my work ethic. They know what I'm like as a person, what I'm like to work with. So in a weird way, we're not auditioning, but we are auditioning for a long time. So it isn't just a big party where it's like, who do I like? It's people who you enjoy being around, but who have also proven themselves time and time again.
And you said something before that is also interesting about that, about being hands-on and knowing who you're working with. I was surprised to hear you say that you and your brother, who are the writers, had salt and pepper shakers and you were staging. I didn't know that writers did staging.
Well, yeah, in the sense of, trying to visualize. It's not necessarily that the director will take our salt and pepper shakers and bring them to life.
There is that.
Yes, but to kind of visualize what it could be, if you're trying to think three-dimensionally when you're writing. And for instance, we have a song in this show called Easy Peasy, and we had this whole concept of Mrs. Doubtfire, or Daniel, it goes on YouTube and is trying to find recipe how to make a meal, and we had this idea to bring that to life. And then so we took a big whiteboard and drew out, because we had to go, okay, how many cast members do we have? How can we utilize these? And when just sketching it out and going, okay, the set over here, and then this person will move over here. Now, what we drew out did not ultimately become what you see on stage, but it was the starting point for it. So, and that's just part of the writing process. And then hopefully the people take it and make it better than what we.
I also love that term, writing three-dimensionally. I'd never heard that term. That's awesome.
Speaking of the writing, talk about that process. Like, what was the inspiration to do this in the first place, to turn a movie into a musical?
We, like he mentioned, Kevin McCullum, who was the producer for Something Rotten, and when they were, Kevin had the rights to several different movie titles that he was developing. And he had approached us. There were Mrs. Doubtfire being one of them. Another one was A Night at the Museum, and there might have been a couple others. And he asked us if we were interested in taking a look at at any of them. And so we discussed. I mean, one of the things as a writer, when you're looking at adapting something like that, one of the first questions you ask is, does it sing? You know, and the second question is, why should this be a musical? You know, and for us, the subject matter of Doubtfire, we all three writers, we have kids. This is a story about a father who would do anything to be with his kids. We could all relate to that very deeply. And also, the movie had a lot of places that it chose not to explore, and we thought that that's some places that we could go. There was room to play with. One of them being the relationship between the father and the oldest daughter, and exploring more children of divorce and how that affects a family. And so it just seemed to be rich with a lot of heart that we could play with. So that it became appealing to us.
How long did it take to write?
What's today?
Yeah, I was about to say, are you done?
Yes.
Because if you are, you can let us know anytime, any day now.
Yes. We started that discussions, I'd say around 2017. And then we actually, I think this tour was the first time that we did not do any major significant changes to the script. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Much to their misery a lot of times.
So what is that like as an actor? You've learned your part, and he comes in and says, "Hey, we're gonna do this whole new thing." What's that like?
It can be frustrating, but it's the best idea wins, right? So if they come in and they go, "What about this?" and you read the page, and you either go, "Okay," or and you go like, "Well, when we get it up on its feet, we'll feel it," right? Or you get a page and you go, "That's better. That's better." They did a new opening number in the West End, and the second I got the pages, I read the first page and I went, "You achieved in 35 seconds what we used to do in the first 8 minutes of the show in the first draft." It was like it was just streamlined and clean and funny and quick, and you know when you read and you go, "That's better. That's better. That's better." It's just and it's a collaborative art form. So as frustrating as it can feel to go like, "Oh my gosh, I have to learn a new," and sometimes you're getting like, "Here's a new song. We're not going to put it in tonight. We'll put it in tomorrow night. So learn this song today, then sing the old song tonight, then we'll put in the new song tomorrow." And you're like, that happens. But if you know it's a good idea, you're willing to put in the work to implement it for sure. But it was a very exciting moment. I will tell you, I was doing Beetlejuice the musical on Broadway, and Kevin McCullum asked me if I wanted to do a reading with these friends at the West Side Arts Theater, this little theater off Broadway in New York. We're going to do 2 presentations, one at 10, one at 11, and one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. We did the 2 presentations, and Kevin called me about a half an hour after the second presentation and said, "We have an out-of-town venue and we have a Broadway house. You need to pull out a Beetlejuice." I've never been in a part of a workshop where that has happened before. Most of the time you leave going, "We'll see if we ever see those people again." And there was an energy in that room that day. It was super exciting.
I'm just going to say I've done 2 shows with Wayne, and both readings had the same energy at the end of it. I still remember sitting at Dallas Barbecue with the cast after Something Rotten, and we were like, "Okay, who wants to sit next to me in the dressing room? Because this is happening." And it felt the same after Mrs. Doubtfire.
And it's very rare. It's very rare. We've been very lucky. You know, we do tons of readings and workshops that don't go anywhere.
So how many of you have seen Mrs. Doubtfire the musical already? How many of you have seen the movie? Okay. So what's the movie about, and then how is the musical adapted?
I have an interesting thing that I've been saying, and I feel like I'm discovering it as I bring it on tour, because there was a woman at a talkback in the previous city who said something, and she thought she was going to offend me at first, and it was actually the greatest compliment she could give me. You were there for that. Yeah. She said, "Please don't take offense to this. Robin Williams in the movie is likable." And I was like, Jesus. And then she goes, no, please. What I mean is, in the beginning of the musical, you kind of understand why she needs to divorce this guy. And I said, that's actually what they were after. Because the movie, if you go back and watch the movie, the happy ending of the movie is that Miranda lightens up. That's that happy ending of the movie. The musical is about Daniel not being a good partner or father, and the journey of being Mrs. Doubtfire teaches him how to be a better parent, which is a far more interesting story for a musical. But it means Daniel starts in a more unbearable place, and the audience is kind of Miranda's point of view on him as like, oh my God, will this guy please stop doing impressions? But it's a fascinating difference that I appreciate.
Yeah, and that was something that we were very mindful of, that we wanted to have a more well-rounded character in the Miranda character, so that she's not just presented as a shrew. Like there's a reason why she can't take this anymore. And so we feel for her. We want to feel for her and understand why she would get to the point to where she would ask for a divorce. And so that was very important for us to pursue. And we were constantly going, okay, we want to like her. We don't want to not like him, but we want to understand and that he is he's a man-child, and we want to be able to present him in a way that we see him grow up, in that concept. Yeah.
And another great story is to tell you were talking about the relationship between Daniel and his oldest daughter,
yes.
But that last song, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so there are some cut scenes from the movie. And there is a scene between Daniel and Lydia, where it's a very heartfelt moment where she is saying, "Why can't you just pretend? Can't we be a pretend? Can you pretend to still be together, to still be in love?" And then he says, "Well, then we would just be a pretend family." And it was this really emotional moment, which they cut from the movie. And of course, we're watching that and going, "Oh my gosh, that's so powerful and emotional," and then it's like, and that's a song, So we wrote a song. When you see that tonight, the just pretend moment is taken from a cut from.
And there was a moment where she came, the original girl. Remember when she came to Broadway?
The actress who played Lydia in the film came and remembered filming that scene that got cut and couldn't believe that it had been turned into such a poignant moment.
She said she had burst into tears, and we remember where she was sitting. She was like 7th row, right on the aisle.
Great.
Yeah, and having probably filmed that, yeah, and there it was in front of her, just seeing it fleshed out, which is...
Yeah, and for me, it's my favorite part of the show. I choke up every time.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, I'd love for each of you to answer this question. What do you want audiences to walk away with when they see the show?
I'll start because my microphone is right here. People ask me all the time, how can you do so many performances? How can you do, and it's never about us. It's always about the experience that you're going to have. And for this show, and I think a lot of the reason we brought this on the road was because I want them just to leave with a full heart. Not just laugh, but feel something.
Yeah, and I mean, piggybacking off that, there is something wonderful about hearing so many people laugh right now when we need laughter, which also ties into the heart. So I think for me, it's just joyful. It gives me goosebumps to get to hear thousands of people laugh every night.
I think what I love about the show is that it's subversive in its heart, right? Everyone hears the title Mrs. Doubtfire, and they're like, "Oh, that movie's so funny," and then they come and they're headed to the parking lot, going like, "What?" I love that because it's the reason the musical should and does exist, right? Anytime you hear about like some major motion picture becoming a musical, there's always a million cynical people who go, "Why? Don't break the thing that I love. Why are you doing that?" And then they come and see it, and I have a folder at home with 220 letters from people who have come to see the show who are the children of divorced households. Everything from a 12-year-old whose parents are right in the middle of a divorce who are saying, "I wish my dad fought as hard to be with me as Daniel fights as hard to be with his kids," to a couple named Amy and Joseph who were in their 20s who just found out that they couldn't have children. And she wanted to bring up the subject of adoption with her husband, but wanted it to be sensitive, didn't know how to bring it up. They went to see Mrs. Doubtfire on Broadway, and in line at the parking garage, because of a speech Mrs. Doubtfire gives at the end of the show about families being able to look like anything as long as there's love, she brought it up, and here's the photo of our new adopted son. Thank you, Mrs. Doubtfire. So that's what I'm hoping, that the show changes people's lives, because I think good theater does, and I don't think people expect this show to have that kind of impact, and it's our pleasure to surprise people 8 shows a week with this story having a new function in bringing that to people,
Yeah, I think they summed it all. For someone to come to a show and be surprisingly moved is the greatest reward for a writer, for sure. To leave, thinking you were going in to see one thing and you leave being enriched by what you see, that's money.
All right, it's time for you three, to get ready for the show. And I think, Wayne, are you staying for the show tonight?
He's seen it. He knows how it ends.
Thank you
all.
Thank
you, everybody.
Let's thank them for participating. Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. You can find all of our Inside Out podcasts at tpac.org and on your favorite podcast channels.